The Gothic style of architecture was first introduced in the early 12th century and continued well into the 16th century. Gothic architecture was essentially created to solve the need for larger and more structurally sound buildings. First introduced in northern France region, Gothic architecture replaced the old style of Romanesque architecture. Gothic architects modified the system of ceiling vaulting, added flying buttresses, as well as exquisite biblical stained glass windows and statues, creating an overall greater visual experience. During the Gothic period and Renaissance, 1100 AD to 1500 AD, glass staining was one of the most used styles of painting. Although a different form of painting than most are traditionally accustomed to, paying close attention to detail, one would be able to note that each pane of glass was painted using a variety of dark tones which illuminated the light that shone through behind them. The bigger part of the stained glass artwork was used in churches and cathedrals and depicted religious, Christian, narratives and scenery to inspire the lives of the faithful. Stained glass can also be found in city halls as well as the private homes of the wealthy. We'll take a deeper look into the stained glass from one of France's most highly regarded cathedrals, the Reims Cathedral. In this first slide, you can see two different areas of stained glass. The first, found near the ceiling in the main hall of the cathedral, and the second amongst the walls. The essence that stained glass creates inside a cathedral is cathartic to most who step into it, as the stained glass allows in colorful light to contrast the darkness of the cathedral. Gothic artists intended for this to brighten up the building, as well as have religious motives illuminated through the halls. This created a serene environment for those who prayed and showed their respects to God. In the second slide, the left image depicts what the cathedral would have looked like in the time of construction. The image to the right is the recreation done in the mid-1900s after the German bombings of World War I destroyed some of the stained glass. They were reconstructed by a German artist, Emmy Nobel. Pointed arches and ribbed vaulting were first seen in the late Romanesque buildings. Ribbed vaulting is one of the distinguishing features that define Gothic architecture. Inside Reims Cathedral, it has stone vaulted ceiling. Ribbed groin vaults were used. Tremendous weight has been exerted downwards and out through these ribbed groin vaults. The pressure drawn as supporting by using flying buttresses from the outside. Downward pressure is supported by much lighter piers instead of Romanesque massive columns. It allowed an opening of some walls and making bigger windows to let light flood into the church without any obstruction. Looking down the aisle at the ribbing, the pattern forms an impressive linear decoration. The architecture is using the light purposely to create a symbolic expression of divine successfully. People could see the sunshine in the church and also feel the sunshine in their lives. As King's power was expanded and more cathedrals built around, attracted more people to go into the churches and believe in Christian, the territory of France was getting bigger. As previously mentioned, flying buttresses were also a key factor in Gothic architecture. But what is a flying buttress? The flying comes from the upper part of the wall that turns into a pier. This gives support to the roof or vaults of the structure that allows a vertical ornament to be shown. As seen in previous structures, most architects in modern architecture were known to hide the structural part of a building which generally acts as the skeleton. However, the buttresses used this support system as part of the style, showcasing the structure from both outside and inside the ceiling. Reims Cathedral is a prime example of structure with flying buttresses. This cathedral had the ability to use a layout that was both open and housed high ceilings as well. The buttresses and their strict design allowed for the high ceilings and minimal thin stone walls that left ample room for stained windows. This characteristic of Gothic architecture is important because it provided natural light inside, which was the key to belief that God was present at the time with tall ceilings, and it gave the advantage of being closer to heaven. Rose windows, otherwise known as wheel windows, are large stone traciered circular windows. They are called this because they are made of a series of smaller windows that radiate out of the center, like the petals of the flower or the spokes of a wheel. Rose windows typically appear over the center portal of the west front of a cathedral, or on at least one of the transit ends. They are very common throughout France and appear in many Gothic-style cathedrals. These pieces, however, did not begin rolling into popularity until the 13th century. The ability to incorporate such large glass works into the walls did not become possible until the structural innovation of ribbed vaulting and buttresses to support the weight of the solid planes. Rose windows themselves were not simply a decorative piece, nor just a symbol of letting the divine light. They also represented a concept of completeness and balance. They were geometric and represented how many parts can come together to make a whole. Whatever the style of window, all the elements would come together to create a whole cohesive design. It held a lot of symbolism of how, though we were all many different kinds of people, we could all come together to become one with God. The Reims Cathedral, built in 1211, was the site of 25 coronations of French kings and has been referred to as one of the most beautiful examples of Gothic architecture. It was built with an elegant stained glass window, which unfortunately only about 20% of the originals have survived throughout history. Its high ceilings, incorporated as a way of being higher towards God, as well as ribbed vaults and flying buttresses, were key characteristics of Gothic architecture. Abbot Seguier is credited with being the inventor of Gothic architecture, despite him not actually being an architect himself. In order to announce France's rebirth, Seguier decided the Royal Abbey Church of St. Denis, which was the symbol for France, needed a facelift. Seguier believed that the churches would be bigger and brighter. In order to showcase the light in the churches, he knew he needed to make some elaborate modifications to the structure. The importance of bigger, more elegant churches' cathedrals is that because of the population's illiteracy, the stained glass windows essentially provided a storytelling way where the citizens could read the Bible. The early 12th century was a time of religious discovery in Christianity, and the people of France were focused on building an identity centered around religion, and the rebuilding of cathedrals was centralized around the idea of the everlasting kingdom. Thank you.